Hi, Kenyan Christians. What Christians should ask of government to not play God, Part 2. Number 2. Today, that temptation manifests itself in the form of ideologies. In his book Political Visions and Illusions, David Koizis makes a provocative claim. Ideologies are a form of idolatry. An ideology takes something good in the created order and sets it up as the ultimate aim in place of God, making creation revolve around it and serve it. An ideology says that this thing is what has the capacity to save us rather than God. An ideology often contains in it some truth and some good. Number 1. Liberalism. Liberalism elevates the autonomy and freedom of the individual. Much of our human rights discourse comes from this tradition, and it has produced undeniably good things: the end of slavery, religious freedom, and freedom of speech, for example. What liberalism misses, however, is any claim on individuals by community, tradition, or God's authority that would limit that liberty. In liberalism's narrative, we submit to authorities not because God has commanded us to, but because we are consented to be governed and entered into a social contract. So how should we be careful of liberalism? Are you tempted to keep expanding the scope of individual liberties or rights so that government has to enter more and more spheres of life in order to protect them? For example, suppose you decided that housing was a right. You might conclude that government might therefore levy significant taxes and use eminent domain to fund and build and maintain housing for every citizen, regardless of the cost that this imposes on others. That might not be just, but if you're in the grip of the ideology of liberalism, you might be blind to that injustice. On the other hand, are you so wedded to the idea of individual liberty that you protect or apologize for people who use their liberties to harm or abuse others? Are you ever tempted to defend a person or entity by saying that they were acting within their rights rather than asking whether what they were doing was right? As you can see, liberalism can actually lead to the ungodly expansion of the state or to its ungodly negligence. Number 2, conservatism. Conservatism elevates a respect for tradition, history, and a humility about what human beings can accomplish. Conservatives are particularly aware of the fragility of human endeavor and of the tendency of human beings to fall into evil. In this sense, they capture a truth that's recognizable to Christians: that we are sinful and that we should therefore be skeptical about our capacity to accomplish big good things, especially with the state's power of the sword. What conservatism misses is that tradition can work towards justice or towards injustice. The first question you have to ask a conservative is, what are you trying to conserve and why? You're not likely to get a consistent answer across geographies or especially across time periods. Go back 30 or 50 years, any number of traditions from that time that you want to conserve will be a mixed bag. Absent is a serious examination of whether a particular tradition is worth preserving according to God's definition of justice. And for this reason, conservatives urge caution when change is proposed. There are ways things have always been done, and while they are not perfect, no tradition is without some redeeming value that is worth conserving. So how should we be careful? Do you uncritically resist change rather than asking whether the change moves us towards justice or away from it? Think about arguments for the maintenance of slavery, some of which played on a fear of the disruption to society and way of life that emancipation would cause. These are excerpts from What Christians Should Ask of Government to Not Play God from the 9 Marks website. We need God's help. Renouncing all, counting all as loss, means that we will seek to deal with the things of this world in ways that show that they are not our treasure, but rather that Christ is our treasure. That is, we will hold things loosely, share things generously, and ascribe value to things in relation to Christ. We will seek to leave the paradox of 1 Corinthians 7:30-31. Let Christians buy as though they had no goods, and those who deal with the world as though they had no dealings with it. From the Desiring God website. Thanks for watching. Bye.